Hi, everybody on Twitch and soon to be on YouTube. There we go, live everywhere. Everywhere live. Mostly because, yeah, Twitch is a little bit funky when it comes to starting up. Okay, and currently fighting with, okay. I have someone who's joining me tonight. Artemis again. Hey, Artemis. You gonna say something? Or you just be quiet? Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I have a cat beside me who's not saying much right now, but usually she's fairly loud. So if you hear anybody in the background, that is likely her. Okay, and in the meantime, I was supposed to have this all ready to go before I started. That didn't happen. That's fine. That's just how this went. All good. Okay. So, for those of you who are just tuning in, I am currently reading my father's manuscript. Scripts, multiple, but tonight it's just the one. And just the one chapter, or chapter 3 in this case. Anyway, the name of the story is called The Saga of Haram. What is it about? Well, so far the story is there are a set of best friends, the two best friends, and they seek off for their adventure. Now, when we last left off, they were about to be beset by goblins, a whole entire group of goblins. So I'm gonna hop into it, and warning again for those of you who have not tuned in before. I'm going to be doing live edits, so that means that you're going to see my head go down, and if I stop talking, I'll try not to do that. I'll try to at least converse with you while I'm marking things up, but I will be marking up this manuscript as I read from it in order to make editorial changes. I'm hoping won't need anything structural, because if it's structural, then that's a whole other matter altogether. And you and I will find out together, because I have no idea. I have not read this book before. Yes, I will be balancing a cat on my leg for possibly about 5 or 10 minutes. She probably won't stay on here for long, because she'll get bored, because that's how this goes. Anyway, so without further ado, Chapter 3. Remembering Orit's instructions, Haram jumped backward. The goblin came on. Haram moved backward again, keeping his eyes on the advancing foe. Suddenly, something caught Haram's heel and he stumbled, going down heavily on his back. Laughing triumphantly, his opponent leaped forward for the kill. Haram flung up his hand, trying to ward off the sword with his stick. The goblin fell on him heavily. Haram stabbed with his dagger again and again at the goblin's side, but the blade did not seem to penetrate the leather. He remembered how Oritz had told them that goblins were trained for combat from imphood. I'm doomed, he thought, but he gritted his teeth against a scream of terror and determined to die fighting. He was suddenly aware that the goblin was not moving, and in the same movement he became aware of Oritz's laughter. Then the heavy goblin was thrown off of him, and Oritz was chuckling at him. He struggled to his feet. Haram saw the arrow, and one of the Gendarmerian's black shafts sticking through the goblin's neck. He also saw the scratches on the goblin's leather armor, where he had been striking with his knife. Oritz was still smiling as he said, "A magnificent fight, lad!" Haram was about to return a hot answer, but he controlled his embarrassment by taking a deep breath and said instead, "Well, as you've told us, any fight you can walk away from is a good fight." Oritz just exploded in fresh laughter and clapped him on the shoulder. "Ah, good lad, you might do yet." Then they began looting the dead, with Oritz lecturing the boys as the group worked. Goblins wear little of value in the way of jewelry, especially those whose rank is low enough for them to be assigned to scouting duties. Now, here's a pair of copper bracelets. One one with what looks like a gem in it. This gem is actually a bit of glass, but we'll keep the bracelets. He called instructions to the boys as they continued to work. Leave the shields, they're large and bulky and worth little at the market. Leave the daggers and the tools, they aren't worth the bother of taking them away. Keep the swords and anything that looks valuable. In the belt pouches, they found money of various sorts. What are these coins, Orist? There were 10 silver coins with a king's face on one side and a tower of brick on the other. Orist looked over his shoulder briefly. From Shandakar, worth about as much as a silver pony. The silver pony was the common currency of Aradar, so called because many years ago they had a horse on the reverse side, the symbol of the kings of the land. There were 3 silver ponies in the loot from the goblins. In addition to these, there were 52 copper coins of several sorts, all unfamiliar to Haram. When he asked Oritz about them, Oritz answered, "Don't worry about it. Copper's copper. If we can't spend them, we'll sell them for the metal." When all the goods had been piled together, Oritz glanced at the position of the sun in the sky, then looked at Haram and Merritt. "Not the sort of treasure you'd been expecting? Best you accustom yourselves to it. This is the sort of thing we usually come by. Oh, occasionally if we find a goblin chief or a hobgoblin, there is a bit of gold, but not often." Haram, who had been thinking that the gains were very small for the risk involved, kept his thoughts to himself, but instead said, "Do we share it out now?" Orts cast another glaze at the sun. "Nay, not yet. And in any case, we seldom share out after one such skirmish. The shares are hardly worth the bother. We'll wait until we have a bit more. Now, pack all this on the pony and let us be gone." As they were packing, Haram said to Orist, "We've got some swords here. How be if Merritt and I take one of them each, to be paid for our shares as they come up?" "By Tran and Vera, no!" Haram quailed back. Orist went on a little more calmly. "Oh, sorry, this is a little awkwardly worded. By Tran and Veron, no." Haram quailed back. "Oh, yeah. See, that's what I'm saying. Give me a minute." Orist went on a little more calmly. "Those swords are goblin swords, lad, and anyone who knows swords will see that they're goblin swords. We can take them to a smith and sell them, and the smith will be able to fashion them into other forms and sell them himself. But if you were to go about wearing goblin swords, and there are those who would think that surely you are goblin friends, take my word, goblin friend is not a name you want attached to you. And if you hope to survive among humans, best wait for your swords. Now, are we nigh ready to be gone?" They did not flee back the way they had come, as Haram had expected, but rather went off at an angle. He took advantage of a short pause that afternoon to ask Oritz about this. "If we were to flee back along our path, the goblins would see it as just that, flight, and would strain to catch up to us to have their revenge. If we go off as we have done, deeper into their territory, it will seem to them that we are not terribly concerned, and thus they may ask themselves if we might be beyond their abilities to fight. Perhaps we have some terrible magic or such. Be like it will make them a little less anxious to come up against us. Hiram nodded. Altogether, the life of adventurer was seeming much different from what he had been led to expect. Not precisely worse, but different. He was not sure whether they deluded the goblins or not, but that band never did catch up with them. They saw no more goblins. As they went up and down the brush-strewn rocky hills. It was Merritt who asked, "Are there truly goblins in these hills?" Asteran looked at him scathingly. "No, we are wandering about here for the sheer pleasure of it. If you look at the trail, you can see goblin tracks aplenty. Some older, some newer. But that's much to be expected from a town brat, I suppose." Hiram could not see any tracks either, though he took Asteron's word for it. He did think, though, he kept it to himself, that she ought to have been pointing out the signs of goblin passage for them, so they could eventually recognize them on their own. Should not all the party have some training in this? Bum bum bum. He wondered about the possibility of hiding an ambush for the goblins, but he said nothing to any of the others. They were more experienced than he, and if they thought it was a good idea, they would have brought it up themselves. Wait a minute here, hold on. Yeah. On further reflection, he dismissed the idea. The goblins following them were estimated at 30 to 50. Against that, 5 people were too few. Even after they left the hills, they did not slacken their pace greatly. When goblins were looking for vengeance, they can be persistent, Moritz said. They slowed a little when they came to the road again, and soon came to the town of Sandaris. 3 ways, so called because 3 roads joined there. In Sandaris, they sold their loot. Astron did the bargaining for them, and it was instructive to watch her deal with that dumpy little merchant with the wispy gray beard. "A copper apiece for these bracelets? I have fool written across my forehead, perhaps. There's copper enough in 2 of them to make 6 copper pieces. I'll take 5 coppers and still know I'm being hard done by. And I have rich fool across my forehead? By Tren and Viron. Where would you pay weight for weight copper coins for plain copper? 3 coppers. Give me 4 and it's done, thief." The merchant was not put off by the insult. "What else have you? The swords? Nicked and bashed around a bit, aren't they? 2 ponies for the lot." "2 ponies? Listen, I know and you know you're not going to sell goblin swords to anyone, save perhaps goblins. They'll go to a smith for the metal to be made into whatever he wishes. And that being the case, nicks and bashes don't count. 2 ponies apiece. My wife and children starved because I am so good-hearted. 3 ponies for the lot. 6 ponies, or I go down to listen where and to see if there's an honest merchant there. 4, robber woman. 4 ponies and 7 coppers then. 4 and 5, or you can go to listen where. I take it, but only because there isn't an honest merchant in town." And so it went, all through the goblin loot. At the end, Astran came away muttering, "Ought to have gone to listen where." Though he had no notion of the worth of goblin swords or bracelets, Hiram was quite sure that she'd gotten the best price possible. After they had left the shop with their money, Hiram spoke quietly. "Do you really think we ought to have taken it to listen where?" She looked around to see that no one was listening, and then said, "No, not really. It's always good to convince them that they have gotten the best out of the bargain. It puts them in a good frame of mind for the next bargain." At Sandaris, they replenished some of their supplies and then set out westward. A little west of the town, they came to a river, flowing south to north across their path. Turning, they followed the river to the source of its source in some hills. After the first day, Asteran shook her head. No goblin tracks in these hills, not since the last rain. 2 days later, she said, still no goblin tracks. Very old ogre trace, that's all. Asteran shot a few rabbits to supplement their rations. She skinned them out and put their hides on stretchers. They'll be worth a silver pony each, though I don't doubt we'll get that much for them. She looked at Haram and Merritt. You see the sorts of things adventurers do? Anything that could add a few coins to the purse and not leave the folk of a village angry with you. Not the sort of high adventure you'd expected, is it? But it is still better than living all your life in the city of the moon, knowing that each day will be like the last one before it and the one before that, protested Merritt. They moved southwestward out of the hills, striking the road and moving westward along through the forest. Well within the forest, they came upon the town known as Lisenhauer, the town in the wood. The people were dark of hair and complexion, and seemed generally friendly at first. Astran sold the rabbit skins, getting almost as much for them as she thought they were worth. And on the strength of that, they decided to have supper at the inn in town. They had ordered their supper and were waiting for it when the door opened and 5 townspeople came in, all sturdy tradesmen bearing cudgels. They looked around and then came straight over to the table where the adventurers sat. One of them, clearly chosen beforehand, as a spokesman, said, Sirs and lady, this is a peaceful town. We wish no trouble here. Orts looked up in puzzlement. We wish no trouble either. We want only to eat our supper in peace. Eating supper is fine. Even drinking a little bit of ale is acceptable. What we frown upon is drunken brawling. And why would you expect us to be the sort to indulge in drunken brawling? We have come through this town a time or two before and have had no trouble. Stories have a way of traveling up and down the roads, sir. Enjoy your meal, but drink carefully. If there is trouble, we will be able to deal with it. They turned and walked away, leaving Oris to continue glowering long after the door had shut behind them. So that was an ominous warning. I don't know what that means, but I'm curious for sure. Yeah. There really wasn't, I'm really happy. There was just one area to mark up. Last night I didn't get a chance to do the editing that I wanted to, so I'm going to be doing that in a little bit. And yeah, let's try and see if there's anything I wanted to think of for this. No, I'm kind of happy with this chapter. This chapter feels fairly solid. Like I said, structural editing notwithstanding, that's probably going to be something that's coming later. I know that typically you shouldn't do the narrowing in right away. You should always do a bird's eye view. And I'm kind of doing that because I'm going to be making notes of each chapter as we go through them. I'm going to do just sort of a quick little summary of each chapter to kind of get an idea of where it's going, and that way I can kind of do an overview and read over the story once I've written out all the summary of the chapters. But yeah, so I know it's a little bit short today. They may all be very short. I'm not really sure yet because it looks like there's smaller chapters than what I've been reading in the past. In the past, I've been reading a lot of 22-page chapters. These all seem to be between 9 and something. And I have to do some other, like anywhere between 4 to 10 pages tops, like not even 10 pages really. Um, Having said that, I have to do some figuring out tonight because I saw some. There's like a word count at the top of the manuscript, and I have to confirm that that's how many words are actually there because I'm not sure if that word count means how much are supposed to be there, and it's not yet. And that's what he's like figuring out. He was figuring out, or if that's what is the actual word amount. So I'll double check. I'll let you guys know what it was tomorrow. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all again tomorrow. Take care.